Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing really well. So I enjoyed making my last episode, my top 10 tech horror movies, so much that I thought I would do another one for you guys. But this time we are looking at my top 10 Stephen King movies. That's not movies directed or made by Stephen King, but rather movies that are based on Stephen King's work, either his novels or his novellas and short stories. And boy, is there a catalogue to choose from. Over the last few decades, there have been countless adaptations of Stephen King's books, and we're even at the point now where there are multiple adaptations of the same story. Stephen King has fascinated readers, moviegoers, and horror fans for years. He's often considered the granddaddy of horror, and it's not really hard to see why. King has this effortless way of seeing the truth in the world and the people around us, and how evil can be found in the most familiar and unexpected of places. And he sees that there is true horror in the world and living within people, and he puts that into his writing. One of my favourite Stephen King quotes is, "Monsters are real and ghosts are real too. They live inside us and sometimes they win." Now I have to say I haven't seen every movie out there that is based on Stephen King's work, so this list is just going to be based off of the ones that I have seen. I'm also sticking to just horror movies, so movies like Stand By Me, The Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption won't be on this list. Also, a little heads up that I am going to be talking about some key points from these movies, so mild spoilers may be included. I'm also not going to put these in any particular order because I think that would just be far too difficult, but I will give a shout out to one or two that I love more than the others. Misery was released in 1991 based off of the book Misery, which was published in 1987. It follows best-selling novelist Paul Sheldon, who, while on his way home after finishing his latest book, meets with a car accident during a blizzard. He is rescued by an obsessed fan, Annie Wilkes, only to discover that he is actually her prisoner. Misery is one of my most recent watches out of these movies, and I have to say I was blown away by it. I think that this is by far one of the best adaptations out there. I haven't read the book, but I know that there have been a couple of changes made from the book for the movie, for example, Paul being hobbled instead of having his foot amputated. What stands out to me about Misery from other Stephen King stories is how wonderfully simple it is. For the most part, it's just set in Annie Wilkes' house where she keeps Paul prisoner, and we gradually see how mentally unstable she is. There's no supernatural horror to contend with, rather it deals with mental health and addiction. Addiction being a very common theme through a lot of Stephen King's works due to his own struggles with drink and drugs. The Shining was directed by Stanley Kubrick and released in 1980. It follows the Torrance family, Jack, Wendy and their son Danny, who has abilities that allow him to see visions, have premonitions and communicate telepathically to others with the same ability. Jack gets a job as a winter caretaker at the Overlook Hotel while it's closed for the winter season, so he and his family move into the hotel. Whilst there and struggling with isolation, they deal with ghostly visions and Jack's deteriorating mental health. Of course, The Shining was going to be on this list. It's one of the most well-known and well-loved Stephen King adaptations. Well loved by fans, that is. It's a known fact that Stephen King is not himself a fan of this movie, although his opinions have softened over the years, but it's not hard to see why King is not a huge fan of the film. Multiple changes were made from the book, including reducing the focus on alcoholism, the characterizations of Jack and Wendy, and of course the ending. King also has a very personal connection with this story, as while he was writing it, he was struggling with his own addictions, and he puts a lot of himself into the character of Jack. Personally, I'm a fan of the movie. I think that the terror that comes from their isolation and suspicion of each other is fascinating, and with so many creepy and iconic visuals and an intense performance by Jack Nicholson, there's so much to enjoy in it. 1408 is based off of the short story of the same name and was released in 2007 and stars John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson. It follows Mike Enslin, a successful author who enjoys worldwide acclaim debunking supernatural phenomena. All that changes when he checks into the Dolphin Hotel. Ignoring the warnings of the hotel manager, he learns the meaning of true terror when he spends the night in room 1408. 1408 is one of the lesser-known Stephen King adaptations, but it's another of those wonderfully simple and focused horror movies. Its scares and unease come from a psychological level rather than just gore and violence. It was released at a time where we were fully established in the torture porn era of horror, and I think that what 1408 did was remind audiences what it's like to be scared and feel uncomfortable subtly without the use of blood and guts. The majority of the movie follows John Cusack's character Mike as he has his experiences within the hotel room, and I think that John Cusack does a very solid job of moving the movie along. There are often similarities between Stephen King's works, and what struck me with 1408 was the similarity it has to It, where you have an evil force that feeds off of people and their fears and their loneliness in order to break them or feed from them. The Mist is based off of a novella of the same name. It was directed by Frank Darabont and released in 2007. It follows David Drayton and his son who, following a storm, head into town to gather food and supplies. Soon afterwards, a thick mist rolls in and engulfs the town, trapping David and others in the grocery store. Terror mounts as deadly creatures lurk hidden in the mist, but that's nothing compared to the dangers within the store. The Mist is a very important movie to me as it's the film that helped launch this very channel. I also happen to think it's one of the most amazing adaptations of Stephen King. For the movie, Frank Darabont wanted to change the ending of the story from the one in the novella. The ending in the book just kind of ends. The survivors are left driving in a car heading off into the mist to an unknown future. But if you've seen the movie, you know that the ending is very different. In fact, in my opinion, it is one of the most desperately sad and hopeless endings in any movie. I read that King is actually a fan of the ending despite it being changed from his own. He described it as being so anti-Hollywood and nihilistic. The Mist, like another project that Frank Darabont would go on to work on, is a study of human behaviour, mistrust and the wrong assumption that all people are basically good. Within the grocery store we see the breakdown of society and acts of incredible cruelty. Secret Window is based off of the novella Secret Window, Secret Garden. It was released in 2004 and stars Johnny Depp, Maria Bello and Timothy Hutton. It follows Mort Rainey, a successful writer who, while in the process of an ugly divorce, moves to a lakeside cabin for solitude. While there, he hopes to recover his mental health and write, but he is accused by a farmer named Shooter of plagiarism. Rainey ignores the claims, but eventually Shooter becomes vicious in his quest for retribution. I'm a big fan of Secret Window despite it having mixed reviews. I think there's something very cosy and comforting about the lakeside setting, and with other stories such as Misery and 1408, the scares of Secret Window come from a very simple idea. The movie's themes are that of reality, mental health and perception, and as the movie progresses it becomes very clear that Mort is really struggling from his divorce and he becomes obsessed over his story's ending. There almost becomes a bit of a meta element to the story as well as Mort's book begins to merge with his own life. Gerald's Game is a Netflix original that was released in 2017 and stars Carla Gugino and Bruce Greenwood. It follows a married couple who go away for the weekend in an attempt to reignite their failing marriage. Jessie's husband then dies, leaving her alone and handcuffed to the bed. As the hours pass, Jessie becomes delirious and is haunted by memories from her past. Gerald's Game was directed by Mike Flanagan and I absolutely loved it. I am a big fan of Flanagan's work and this is no exception. We also see a lot of returning cast that are familiar faces in his other works. I have to say that if I were only to recommend one or two movies from this list, this would be one of them. This movie genuinely made my skin crawl and it stayed with me for a long time after watching it. It's another one of King's simpler stories where for the most part we are in one setting and following one character. But what the story delves into and explores has so much depth, emotion and meaning to it. It explores Jessie's abuse at the hands of her father and the patterns that continued later in life with her husband. The film is saturated with the message of confronting your own fears and traumas and has an incredible representation of how abusers view their abused and vice versa. Also, shout out to Moonlight Man, one of the creepiest additions to any Stephen King story. Christine was directed by John Carpenter and released in 1983. It's based off of the book of the same name and follows Arnie Cunningham as he restores an old 1957 Plymouth Fury and names her Christine. But Arnie doesn't know that Christine has an evil presence within her, and anyone who tries to come between her and her owner will face the deadly consequences. For me, Christine is a really fun watch, and while I don't personally find the idea of a killer car that scary, there's so much more to enjoy here than the basic premise. But one thing, seeing Arnie's journey from a shy, mild-mannered boy to a 1950s slicker with an arrogant, paranoid attitude is an interesting watch. I love the mixture of the 50s and 80s aesthetics and the use of 50s rock and roll music like Bad to the Bone. And this one is probably the one that I've rewatched the most, as it used to be a comfort movie for me in my late teens, early 20s. Dr. Sleep is another entry directed by Mike Flanagan. It stars Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson and was released in 2019. It's based off of the book of the same name and acts as a sequel to The Shining. Struggling with alcoholism, Dan Torrance remains traumatised by the sinister events that occurred at the Overlook Hotel when he was a child. His hope for a peaceful existence soon becomes shattered when he meets Abra, a teen who shares his gift for the shine. Together they form an unlikely alliance to battle the True Knot, a cult whose members try to feed off the shine of innocence to become immortal. Dr. Sleep is a phenomenal movie with an incredible cast, and yes, while I may be slightly biased as Rebecca Ferguson is one of my favourite actresses of all time, it doesn't change the fact that all the cast here are giving their all in this movie. The Dr. Sleep book is a direct sequel to The Shining book. However, as Stanley Kubrick changed the ending of The Shining, Mike Flanagan also had to change the ending of Dr. Sleep. So Flanagan had to find a way to bridge the gap between the books and the movies and provide an ending that was satisfying for fans of both. And I think that the story that Flanagan gives us is a perfect display of love for Stephen King's books involving the Torrances and the Overlook Hotel. Dr. Sleep, while being a continuation of the story and a sequel, also goes back and visits the past and the ghosts of the past and includes more elements of the story from in the Shining book, but also includes lots of visual elements that were created in Kubrick's movie. I love the continuation of exploring patterns in behaviour, as we now see that Danny is an alcoholic like his father Jack, and the symbolism of the ghosts in the story as they represent our ghosts and demons that live within us. Also, Rose the Hat, hands down one of the greatest villains in any Stephen King story. Carrie was released in 1976 and directed by Brian De Palma. It stars Sissy Spacek and John Travolta and follows Carrie White, a withdrawn teen who faces taunting and abuse from her school classmates. When strange occurrences start happening around Carrie, she begins to suspect she has supernatural powers. When Carrie is invited to the prom, things take a dark and violent turn. So Carrie deals with a multitude of things, from femininity and sexuality to revenge, religious abuse, and the idea of people being good and bad. There are some heartbreaking scenes in this movie as we follow Carrie as she tries to navigate through her teen life, not only being abused by her classmates but also by her own mother. Carrie is a very artistic movie with some interesting shooting choices, and it's undeniably a good film, but for me personally this is probably my least favourite on this list. And finally, what is possibly my favourite Stephen King adaptation, It Chapter 1 was directed by Andy Muschietti and was released in 2017. It stars Finn Wolfhard, Jaden Martell, Sophia Lillis and Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise the Clown. It follows 7 young outcasts known as the Losers Club who live in Derry, Maine. While being targeted by school bullies and apathetic parents, they must also face their worst nightmares in the form of an ancient shape-shifting evil that appears every 27 years. The friends must overcome their personal fears and band together to defeat the bloodthirsty clown known as Pennywise. This is another one that if I had to recommend just one or two to you off of this list, this would be one of them. I think that this is an absolutely beautiful movie, and not just the wonderful visuals, but also the heartwarming idea of abused, abandoned and bullied outcasts coming together and finding support and strength within each other. There are some who say that there is too much use of CGI and a high reliance on jump scares, but I think that the real horrors in it are not the jump scares or the clown, but the reality that these children live with, the horrors of how they're treated by their parents and how no one seems to be there to help. The young cast are absolutely breathtakingly talented and have such good chemistry together that they're just a joy to watch. And Bill Skarsgård has a really fresh take on his Pennywise that differs from that of Tim Curry's. He has these incredible facial mannerisms that he injected into Pennywise with his extended lip and his wonky eyes. It Chapter 1 is a movie that can make you laugh, make you cry and give you some good scares, and honestly, what more could you possibly want? So there you have it guys, my top 10 Stephen King movies. Well, top 10 horror movies at least. For each and every one of these movies, I just kept thinking, man, this is a great movie. Not all King adaptations are done well, but in my opinion, some of them are absolute masterpieces, and hopefully you guys found something that interested you in this list. Let me know down below which ones you have already seen, which ones you think you might check out, and of course, as always, leave me your recommendations as well. In the meantime though, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye guys.